Before I demonstrate how to paint a still life in full color, let's talk about how to use a full color palette in general, and then I'll give you a few basic color exercises to do to get you familiarized with using a full range of colors, and exercises hopefully that'll make it easier for you to paint your own still life. So first of all, when you're laying out all of your colors, a few important principles to keep in mind. Notice that I have all of my prismatic colors, all my bright colors on one side, and all of my earth tones on the other side, minus black. You will occasionally need black, but I recommend, particularly for this painting, not to use it. We're going to avoid black for right now. Alright, notice the layout of my palette. I'm trying to lay out similar colors next to similar colors. So starting with the prismatic side, I've got white. Then next to it, I've got cadmium yellow medium, cadmium red medium, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, and then my green. What is the sense of laying out your palette this way? Well, we know that especially when you start spraying, the acrylic paint is going to have a tendency to spread out a little bit on your palette. If I get a little bit of yellow in my white, that's not a problem. If I get a little bit of yellow in my red, not a problem. Basically, if the colors touching each other, like they are here almost, it's not going to be a problem. They're not going to pollute each other. However, if I take my green and put it next to my yellow, and a little bit of green touches my yellow, I might have to change colors altogether, right? My yellow is going to be polluted with green, and then I'm not going to be able to mix all the really beautiful oranges that I might want. So that's really the whole purpose of laying it out this way. Everybody take note of this palette layout. Please lay out your palette this way and no other way. There are different systems, but I find that particularly for acrylic, this is the most effective one. Now, the other thing is, the prismatic colors are very strong, which means you don't need a lot of them. So squeeze out little bits of them, little drops. Your earth tones, you're probably going to go through a lot more. They're weaker tinters. Most things in nature are kind of neutral colored. You're going to end up using more of your earth tones, these three colors plus blue, than probably any other of the colors on your palette, with the exception of white. So squeeze out a little bit more of the earth tones on the longer side, and then don't squeeze out too much of the prismatic colors. You're basically going to limit them to only when you really need a lot of saturation. Okay, now let's talk about a few basic color exercises that are going to get you started with working in full color. Let's start off by making a basic color wheel. This is something I'm sure you've already done several times, particularly in your Drawing 2 class where you're dealing with watercolor and with, I believe you guys are working in color pastel or color pencil. I can't remember. Let's make a color wheel. We're going to start off by only using our primary colors. What are our primary colors? Yellow, red, and our blue. We're going to put yellow on top. And then you're going to find that in acrylic, yellow is going to be very transparent. You're going to see a little bit of that gray shining through. So in this case, I want you to add a little tiny bit of white to your yellow to increase its opacity, to actually make it a little bit more yellow, like this. Okay, there's our yellow. Let's clean off my brush. Then here is my red. Red is going to be pretty opaque. I'm not going to have to mix any white into it to get the opacity that I want. That's pretty good. Let's clean off my brush again, and let's add a little bit of blue. Okay, so here are my primary colors. Now let's create a color wheel. I'm going to blend using wet into wet blending, if you guys remember what that is. So I'm going to take a little bit of yellow, again add a little bit of white to it to increase the opacity. This way, like this. Make sure you clean out your brushes really well. And then we're going to mix a little bit of yellow into our red. So we're going to pre-mix a little bit of red here, like this. Actually helps to have two brushes when you're doing this. So now I'm going to create a color wheel. I'm going to take a little bit of red, start dragging it into, not dragging, brushing it towards my yellow this way, like that. Let's switch brushes. Let's take a little bit of yellow, and let's do the same thing going the other direction. Again, wet-into-wet blending relies on speed, on pre-mixing. Okay. And now we're going to brush it the other direction and hopefully get something that's pretty even. Okay, so we got a transition from yellow into red. Right, now let's do the same thing for our red and our blue. Going to work those two colors together until we get a fairly even blend. Don't worry if you're seeing a little bit of the colors strike through, the ground colors strike through. That's wet-into-wet blending. Particularly with the more transparent colors, that's something that's going to happen. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing with the blue. It's a fairly straightforward process, right? And in this case, I'm going to switch my brushes and put a little bit of yellow into my blue going this way. Let's go wet into wet the other direction here. Just tickling my colors together. Okay, there we go. Okay, there's my color wheel. What lessons can be learned with this color wheel? Well, a few things to notice. Notice that we have a fairly bright orange. This is pretty bright. Look how dull my green and my purples are, however. Right, so we're expecting a fairly bright purple here with this mixture of blue and red. However, why are we getting something that resembles a little bit more brown than actually purple? And the same question goes with the green, right? We're expecting a fairly bright green here, right? Mixture of blue and yellow. However, this green is fairly muddy. So the question is, why? Well, here's the thing. The colors that we have on our palette are not pure prismatic, right? This red is not pure red. This yellow is not pure yellow. This blue is not pure blue. What's the difference? Well, here's the difference. This red pushes a little bit more towards orange than actual pure red. It's got a little bit of yellow in it. And we know that colors on the opposite side of the color wheel cancel each other out. So yellow is the complementary color, the complement of purple, the opposite color of purple. So what's happening here is that little bit of yellow contamination is canceling out the brightness of the purple here. Right? That's what's going on. Right? So we've got a little bit of orange here, a little bit of yellow here, and that yellow is canceling out the brightness of the purple. The same thing is happening with this green. This blue is not perfectly blue. Ultramarine blue tends to run a little bit towards the violet, a little bit towards the purple. Right? Red is the opposite of green, so that little bit of red contamination in the blue is canceling out the green and making this green kind of muddy. So the lesson with this color wheel is that just about no color you use is going to be theoretically prismatic, is going to be pure. You're always going to have to, quite often going to have to add additional colors in order to get the saturation you want. This is why we have that additional cool red here, right? That's why. All right. This red, this purplish red, is going to allow us to get a much stronger purple. This is why we've got this bright prismatic. this bright prismatic green here? Because there's no way to mix it with our yellow and blue mixture. Right? This is why we have these additional extra power in these colors. So here is the next step for you guys. The next step is to take all of your prismatic colors, and create a second color wheel. This is going to be a little bit trickier, but again, all of this is practice. It's going to help you get familiarized with working in color. You're going to start off with your primary colors, your yellow over here, like this, your red over here, like this, and your blue over here. So between the yellow and the red, you're going to keep it more or less the same. In fact, the same, not even more or less. Right? You're going to blend the two colors. Right? We don't have a separate orange color in your palette. Why? Because we already have a reddish red, an orangish red, and together they mix up a bright enough orange to do the job. Right? This is why you guys don't need a tube of orange paint. Right? These two colors do the job perfectly well. Right? Where you do need the work, you do need the additional color is here. So we're going to take a little bit of this red, start going this way, and then right about here we're going to start going into our alizarin crimson, this way, like this. We're going to transition into alizarin crimson, and then from alizarin crimson we're going to transition into our purple color. It's a little bit sloppy here. Let me extend this out just a touch. Go. Okay, so as I was saying, from the alizarin crimson, we're going to start going towards the blue. And you'll find that that mixture of alizarin crimson and blue is going to create a far stronger purple. Now the fact is, you can actually get an even stronger purple than this. If you want, if you buy a tube of dioxazine purple or manganese purple, an actual purple pigment, as a rule, single pigments are going to be more saturated than any kind of mixture. So a green pigment is always going to be brighter than a mixture of two pigments. It's a mixture of yellow and blue together. That's as a rule. I mean, there are of course exceptions. Okay, so we're going to have the same issue here. We're going to go from blue as we head towards the yellow. We need to switch to our green over here. So we're starting to add green to the color. And then from the green, we're going to mix that green into the yellow. And as a result, we should be able to get a pretty strong, bright green going. Alright, so here are two color wheels. Here, the first one on top, only using your three primaries. So that's going to be your three primary. We've got yellow, we've got red, we've got blue. And then here we have our full prismatic palette. So you're going to start with yellow here. You got your cadmium red here, alizarin crimson, then ultramarine blue. You've got your green here, and then back to yellow. Again, these are very good exercises. They're going to, first of all, allow you to understand where the colors sit on the color wheel, and then kind of help you work with just starting out in color. Okay, the next exercise is also very important. The first thing, you're going to measure out, or just draw out, about 5 squares, like this. So make them about 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. And then you're going to practice matching colors. The first color I want you to match is the color of your ground. For this exercise, I want you to use only 4 colors. Your primary colors, your cad yellow, your cad red, and your ultramarine blue, plus white. No other colors, right? So only use your primaries for this exercise. Here's how this works. So we're going to try to mix up something very, very close to this gray, if not a perfect match. Let's start off with a little bit of yellow, though you can start off with any color. Let's add a little bit of red to it, like this. Let's add some blue to this. So right now what I'm doing is just mixing all the colors together, more or less in kind of even measure. You should get something that looks like just mud. Right, these colors are more or less canceling each other out. However, this mud is not going to be a perfect gray. So the first thing I'm going to do is try to get closer to the value of my ground. Right now this is very dark. Let's add a little bit of white to this. And you can see that white has a little bit of a bluing effect. Any color I add white to is going to push a little bit more towards blue. It's kind of a surprising thing, but it's the case. Okay. I'm going to get close to the value. I'm going to put it down, and then I'm going to ask myself, what is the difference? What is the difference? You can tell that this color is more reddish, right? It's almost pink in comparison with the gray here. All right, so what do I need to do? I need to add more blue. Let's add a little more blue to this. But the thing with blue is it's a very dark color, so it's going to change the color. It might get it closer to where I want it to be. However, it just knocked down the value. So in this case, I'm going to have to add a little bit of white back into it to bring it back to the value that I want. Let's try it. Okay, it's close. It needs to have a little more blue in it. Let's add a little bit more blue to it. And again, because blue is going to darken the value, I'm going to have to add a little bit of white back in to bring the value back up. These kind of color matching exercises are very good for developing sensitivity to matching colors. Okay, that is almost there. So I'm going to get as close as I can. Let's see how I did. Okay. Okay, so when that dries down, that should be pretty close. It might need to have a little bit more red in it, possibly. Be careful how much, because it's going to be just like this. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, I'm going to do it here. Okay, so hopefully when that dries, that's going to be pretty close. Again, the tricky thing with acrylic is that it dries a little bit darker, so that makes it a little bit hard to anticipate sometimes what the color is. Get as close as you can. And then for the next 4 squares, I want you to just choose colors in your room. So it could be the colors of your wall, it could be the color of your favorite book, it could be, I'm just kind of looking around, the color of my sketchbook, and see if you can match the color of 5 different objects in your room. So right now I'm looking at, let's see, it could be like the color of this pen case. Let's try matching the color. Again, no cheating. Try to only use your prismatic colors. So we're dealing with a brown here. So a little bit of yellow, and then this is clearly a little bit too strong. We're getting there. Probably needs a little more yellow. Let's soften the color a little bit with a little bit of blue. So we're going to gray out the color a little bit. Okay, so that might be the color of my pen case, right? What else? Let's try this green, right? So the green on this, I don't know, little Halloween. I don't know if that's an eraser. I don't know what that is. Okay. Okay, how close did I get? Again, because I'm only using prismatic colors, I might not be able to get quite the saturation. But you know what, look, if you want to use all your colors for this step anyway, so for the ground color, use your primary colors. Maybe for other color matching, go ahead and use your other colors, since we're going to be using a full color palette. Why don't we do that? Okay, so I think that's a pretty strong color match. So do this 5 times. Start off with only your primary colors. Match the ground color. That's going to be probably the trickiest thing. Right? I got pretty close, I think. Yeah, look, as it's drying, you can barely tell. So I'm spot on with that. And then look around your room, choose 5 other objects, and do a little color sample for each one of them. That's going to help you sensitize yourself to mixing colors using your full palette. Okay, so please do these exercises for me. Use your Stonehenge paper. Just cover it with 1 sheet of gesso, 1 layer of gesso. You don't need to cover it with 3 for this exercise. And then we'll get going on our full color still life.